Welcome to the Herpcore History podcast, presented to you by Little Shop of Horrors. Feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms for any of your feeder needs. All right, let's go ahead and get into this episode. All right, tonight I am joined by Mr. Dave Long. He was nice enough to join me to talk to me. How's it going, Mr. Long? How are you doing?
Doing well. It's a pleasure to be able to talk with you tonight, Lewis.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do it. So, where'd you grow up around?
So, kind of all over California. I spent 2.5 years in Denver when I was like between the ages of 9 and 11. But the rest of the time, mostly in Southern California, but also Central California. Kind of all over. My dad liked to move around a lot.
Gotcha. And when did you start getting into reptiles?
So, really, from my earliest memories, we were at the time we were living in a place called Newberry Park, which is in SoCal. It was out in the country back then, and there was a hillside right behind our house. It had one of those little concrete ditches for the water runoff, and it was full of side blotch lizards and fence lizards. And so I must have been 5 6 years old, um, chasing those things around trying to catch them. And initially they were faster than me, but eventually I finally caught one. And I remember looking at that lizard and thinking it was just the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And it just, my mom used to joke that she dropped me on my head when I was a kid. For some reason, I've just always liked reptiles
Yes, sir.
and amphibians and just critters in general. So that started my love. So then every chance I had, I was out in the fields, looking for snakes and lizards and seeing what I could see.
Yes, sir. And at that point, were you just, I assume early on, right? It was just you kind of going out there by yourself. At any point, did that kind of change, and did you start herping with other people?
Yeah, so I think y- mostly I hunted by myself until I moved. Moved up to Morro Bay on the Central Coast, and I met a kid. Actually, I went to Cal Poly and met the herpetology professor and one of his assistants, and she introduced me to this kid that lived around the corner from me. Um, who was 4 years younger than I was, name's Paul Sager. We've been friends 40 years now. And so he and I, man, every minute we had, we were out catching king snakes and gopher snakes and hiking around. And, then got a little bit older. We started making road trips. In fact, he was one of the first guys I went to Texas with back in the 80s. And, we did trips all over, a lot of trips through the desert to look for rosy boas and, just started going out. And then as I was going out, I started meeting other folks. Brett Nelson, I met him in Baghdad, Arizona, on the side of the road in 1989 or 90. And then, he became uh, a guy that I went herping with everywhere. And through him, there's several more friends of ours. Ben German, who's an ER doc. And then later on, I was texted by Don Long, who I think we're related, but we're just because we think alike, and he's better looking than I am. But anyway, I think we hooked up, and so for like the last 30 years, it's been Paul and Brett and Ben and Don, and we kind of all been attached to the hip. And the four of us went down to Suriname last year, for example. So we go all over the place: Florida, Indiana, Illinois, Kansas, Louisiana, of course. Lots of Texas trips, including East and South Texas, and kind of really all over the country. We went to Utah a couple months ago. So we're always just trying to get out and see what we can see. And, my goal is to try to find as many different species of U.S. herps and herps around the world when I can travel abroad. So
Excellent.
I'm really going to Texas the first time in 1985. I started to build friendships there that have lasted lifetimes. Back in the day, everybody stayed at the same place, Desert Hills Motel in Del Rio or the Comstock Motel, and all day long you sit around and BS with guys like Jim Dobas from New Jersey, and we just built lifelong friendships. And I met a lot of people, even from California, like Gerald Merker and others who've become lifelong friends, just in Texas on the side of the road. So
Yes,
Jerry
sir.
Salmon, a good friend of mine from the '80s, and I don't know if you know Jerry.
Yes, sir. I've met him. Yes, sir.
Yeah, great guy.
Yes, sir. And so. What was kind of your early? When did you start keeping animals, and what were those species?
Yeah, so pretty young, I would say. So I lived part of the time with my dad, part of the time with my mom. My dad was pretty permissive, but my mom was afraid of snakes, and so I was, I'd have aquariums with tadpoles in them and western toads and just whatever I could find in the neighborhood. And then in the closet was my secret collection of king snakes and gopher snakes and alligator lizards, things that she did not want me to have and did not know about, except on the occasions when they got out, which was more frequent than they should have. But I was a young kid, and snakes are escape artists, and so I got in a lot of trouble for that. But and then later on, when I was about 13, I moved with my dad, and he was, I had a room full of aquariums and snakes, and he allowed me to do that, so that was cool.
Very cool. Very cool. Was there any early aspirations of reproduction in your collection and doing that, or
Yeah, so I think when I was in high school, my senior year of high school, I met Terry Lilly, who was one of the old time import exporter captive breeders, and he introduced me to Lloyd Lemke, who's passed, but was one of the big breeders in Central California at the time. Old school guys, and so I spent hours in their facilities, looking at their collection and learning about captive breeding. And so I started to try to really breed things myself, early to mid '80s, 1980s. And of course, over the years, I learned an awful lot and got a lot better at it. But initially, I had a lot of learning by trial and error. But very early on, I had a big interest in rosy boas, and so I think I've been breeding rosy boas for about 40 years, and then I've been breeding lots of different colubrids, for about that long too. So I have a lot of different varied interests. Every once in a while, I go out and get something new just to have something new to work with. Recently, it was mandarin rat snakes and uh, other Asian rat snakes that I'd never had before, and so I'm having fun, learning about those and in fact, I've got to my left here, I've got an incubator with four giant mandarin rat snake eggs cooking, and I'm super excited because they're one of my favorite snakes I always wanted. But yeah, I'm always captive breeding right now. I'm stressing out because I have a whole passel full of gray banded king snake hatchlings, and so far two out of 17 have eaten pinkies. So I'm going on a lizard hunt in the morning.
yes, sir. Yeah, I know that. I know that struggle, especially when I know I'll be breeding. I try to personally. I'll go out and collect a jar full of Mediterranean geckos
Yeah.
and freeze them up, and I make sure I got a jar full. And when the time comes, I got plenty of them. I know that feeling for sure.
Yeah, I used to live in SoCal where I could get those, and I'm up in the mountains now at 4,200 feet. So, but they're like crack for baby gray bands.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And that was so those early mentors that you ran into. How did you come in contact with those people?
It's a good question. Well, so Terry was well known. He was famous and notorious. In fact, he's still on TV doing things with sharks in Maui. But he was pretty flamboyant. Importer exporter, and he lived in like 4 or 5 miles from my house, and so he's pretty widely known that he had a big reptile collection, and he was importing all kinds of crazy stuff from the Solomon Islands and all over the world. And he'd gotten crosswise with California Fish and Game, and behind Gila Monsters, and I think he was. I don't know. I don't want to disparage him, but they thought he was selling, some California native stuff, which was illegal after 1977. And so they raided his facility, and it was all in the news and stuff. And then turns out they never charged him with anything, and he sued them. And he had an order that they were not even permitted to go anywhere near his property, a court order. So he was kind of a rebel back in those days, but he was nice enough to take high school kids, myself and Paul, and you know, let us come in and just marvel the first albino cow kings, for example, that I ever saw, and the first gray banded king snake I ever saw. There was another thing that was really impactful for me. I lived in Orange County. This was my junior year of high school, so I was probably 16. And I ran into Gary Bagnall, who at the time was the owner of Cal Zoo Supply. And he had a shirt on. I was working as a busboy at the Villa Sweden restaurant in Huntington Beach, and he was sitting there at the table, and I asked him about it, and he gave me his card. And anyway, long story short, I ended up working for him for about 6 months at Cal Zoo Supply, and so that was another really interesting experience. Unloading boxes with 50 baby Burmese pythons, and um, those things bite a
Yeah.
lot. But then changing cages and just learning how to deal with all the different species that he had. And I was cleaning the dart frog cages one day, and I didn't realize I had a cut on my hand, and it ended up in the ER with red lines going up my arm. Everything was fine, but it was a little scary. Um, interesting, interesting experience. So I met some people through that experience as well.
Yes, sir.
That I ended up knowing for years now.
Yes, sir. Excellent. And what were some of those species? I mean, as you brought up, berms and dart frogs, and were there any other standout species you saw coming in at that time? Or
The gray bands especially, I think they were just folks were just starting to figure out how to catch them, and he only ever had a couple come in, and I think Terry had one or two, and king snakes have always been kind of top of list for me. I grew up dreaming about catching California mountain kings, tricolors. But to me, just looking at pictures of gray bands, I think they're the prettiest snake on the planet, or one of them, and so variable, and it's why I've been working with them for so many years. But I just seeing those things just blew my mind. And then I'll never forget, he had an Okatee corn snake come in, and this was in the mid '80s, right? And I was making like 3.35 an hour minimum wage working for him, and I think I worked 6 months to buy this Okatee corn snake, wild caught Okatee corn, that was gorgeous, for like $210, which was a crap load of money back then. But it was like one of my favorite snakes I ever had. I still have Okatee corns to this day. I love them. Just I don't know. There's so many cool critters out there, but those caught my eye very young, but mostly king snakes. I was just a huge king snake fan.
yes, sir. Yeah.
Mhm.
What was kind of your experience with other keepers in that time? What were their focuses, and how were colubrid breeders looked at that point?
Yeah, I think it was still kind of a in its infancy in the '80s and even early '90s. There were a lot of guys out there. I would go to like the San Diego show and meet guys like Bob Applegate, who was breeding some incredible different, the Applegate Pyros, the Arizona Mountain Kings that don't have any black on them, and he was breeding the Greer-eyed Durango Mountain Kings, and things that weren't being commonly bred. And Lloyd was doing the same thing. He had gone to Jalisco and got a bunch of Ruthenite Kings, and was breeding those. And I think shortly after that, the Noblakai Pyros came in from Chihuahua, and so I was able to get my hands on a pair of those back in the early '90s. So it was just kind of, I think, people were figuring it out, kind of dialing it in. But there were guys like Applegate, John Ruiz, Lemke, that had it dialed in very early on. Randy Wright, and then probably my top mentor in life is a guy by the name of Gary Kiesler. Not a lot of people know him, but Gary, he cut his teeth as a youngster as a biologist. And doing rubber boa and mountain king surveys and SoCal for California Fish and Game, and he's magic in the field, just magic.
You run into those
Um,
guys.
Yeah, and so he became, one of my closest mentors, and I still call him for advice all the time. I mean, he's just an amazing guy. But just a quick story. One of my favorite stories is I was able to catch coastal rosy boas by flipping rocks. In my late teens, early 20s, I figured that out, and I figured out how to road cruise them. In places like Whitewater in the low desert. But I could never flip a desert rosy boa in the high desert, and I probably flipped 20,000 rocks at the right time of the year in the right places, and I just couldn't figure it out. And I was begging Gary to take me out, and it took me about a year. He's a very busy guy. It took me about a year to get him to take me out, and I'd been flipping like the week before and just nothing, and really discouraged. And so we come up over the Cone Pass into the high desert, and it's overcast, which is kind of unusual for March. And he looks over at me and he says, "You know what? You are going to catch your first desert rosy boa today." And I'm like, oh, I'm thinking to myself, you jinxed it. There's no way, right? They're like Bigfoot. They don't really, I think they exist, but I can't prove it, right? So so we get up into this isolated mountain range in the Mojave there, and he go down this dirt road. He's got his two young sons there with him, and we get out of the car and we walk over to this beautiful talus slide, and there's a pretty good sized rock, maybe double the size of a loaf of bread at the bottom of the talus slide. And he points at the rock and he says, "There's a rosy boa under that rock." And I'm like, "No way!" And he gestures to his son to flip it over. He flips it up, and there's this bright orange rosy there. And and I'm just like, "Holy shit!" It was just I could not freaking believe it. I go, "How did you know? How did you know that boa was there?" He goes, "There's always a boa under that rock." And I said, "Conditions are perfect. It's overcast." And so then we walked over, I don't know, maybe 15 feet to the left of there, and the talus got really small. It's like golf balls and smaller sized talus. And I had gloves on. He said, "Well, just rake through that. Just kind of rake through that." And I looked at him like he's a crazy man, right? And so, but I started raking through it dutifully, and there's a freaking boa swimming through the talus. I mean, it was just like I uncovered this boa that was just in the talus. I'm like, holy shit! So then he goes, "Follow me." And then we go down a little side canyon that's real close to there. And he's walking through to take me to this other little talus spot, but there's a like the side of the wash, there's a like a baseball sized rock, just in the vertical dirt wash face. And he kind of reaches behind him as an afterthought and flicks it with his index finger, and the rock falls and a boa lands at my feet. And I'm like, you got to be shitting me. So then we go over to this other one. He goes, "Okay, flip this big rock in the middle of the house." I flip it. There's another boa, right? Um, and so then we go over to a mine tailing, and he goes, "Just start pulling these." And these were kind of bigger, fist-sized rocks. And he goes, "Just kind of pull the surface layer of those rocks out." And I found two more boas, about a foot apart, and that one adults. And so yeah, so it was like 6, 7 boas in less than 30 minutes. He goes, "Okay, we're done. Now you know what to do." And we left. And it was just like, holy shit. I mean, just one of those magic guys. Randy Lindbergh's another one, with especially with Lampros, with Mountain Kings. There's very few people on the planet better than him. But
Yes,
just learning from these guys and trying to absorb what they know. Um, it was challenging at times. Guys like Gary would openly share his knowledge, and some others were very very secretive, and so that was a challenge to kind of break through that. So I've always tried to be the guy that wants to help the youngsters, and guys like Don Long. When I met him, he was in his early 20s, and I took him out and showed him everything I knew, and now he's an amazing herper now. But I think paying it forward for the next generation. I mean, there's some value in learning some of the stuff yourself, but some of it is just really frustrating and hard if you don't get a little help,
yes,
especially
yeah.
with some species.
Well, yeah, and especially to kind of go back to your story there. While I'm not familiar with the species, and so maybe once you figure out the formula, it is relatively easy. But my main species that I look for is gray bands, and I think over time we all kind of get to a point. people that are serious about it get to a point where you understand the conditions you're looking for and how to increase your chances. But to be so on point, I mean, that must have been like in your mind what a magical experience where you're like, holy crap,
One of
you
my
know?
favorite memories of my whole life. It was definitely magical. But I do have interesting story about gray bands too. So I started in '85. I did not catch my first gray band until '90, and back then I would take 2 weeks. I mean, I was going at it, and I'm sure you've heard of Buzz Ross.
Yes, sir.
So, I knew, but I don't even know how I met Buzz, but I knew Buzz. He invited me to his place up in Fort Davis, and and so I was asking him for advice, what to do, and he says, "Well, take." And Paul was with me, Paul Sager, and and he said, well, "This is what you need to do. You need to go onto the Langtree Dirt Road that goes to Pandale, and you need to cruise around the Sheep Sign and Blair's Hill and Harkel Draw, that whole first like 5-6 mile stretch, whatever it is, and you need to go 15 miles an hour because they're really hard to see, and if you do that for 10 nights in a row, you're going to catch a gray band." And no, that did not work. I know. In fact, I didn't catch my first gray band on that dirt road until year before last. And a lot of people catch them there. I mean, you absolutely can catch them on that road, but it didn't work for Paul and I. And so, all the while I'm doing this, Buzz is out cruising 90 spotlighting cuts because we spotlighted from cars back in those days and before the law changed. And everybody's out there catching gray bands except us. So I used to give him a hard time because I think he intentionally misled me to keep him off the road cuts out there. And so I was really frustrated. I ran into John Hollister at the motel, and kind of almost half in tears. I can't figure this thing out. Everybody's my favorite snake on the planet. Everybody's catching them but me. What I so you're coming with me tonight. And so he took me out and showed me every road cut from Langtree to Palma Draw. We hit every cut. And he had a story. He'd found a gray band on almost every cut out there, and he showed me the pacing and what to look for, and um, just exactly how to cover the most ground and really be efficient. And after that, I started catching them consistently. Paul and I went out the next night and caught a pair, and so I was stoked. But yeah, it
Well,
was.
it's so interesting that and again and now that I've done a few of these, people can be like, okay, here we go again. But it's so interesting how much John Hollister comes up, because I don't know at this point. There's maybe been one or two guests that I've spoken to that talk about West Texas that don't bring up John Hollister. John Hollister taught my mentor how to herp out in West Texas, that taught me how to do it, and how influential that man is for the West Texas herping scene and kind of what it figuring it out, and being uh, open with sharing information. I'm glad that so many people bring him up, and it's so consistent.
Yeah,
The
no,
legacy that he left.
yeah, it's such a legacy, and I feel like I owe him so much because nobody would tell me anything, and back in those days, anyways. And no, he was just a great guy with his time, and I don't know, I miss him, but I'm just curious to know who was your mentor.
So my mentor was a local guy who taught him how to do it, as the first person to take him out west.
Interesting. The
So
name sounds familiar to me, but I'm not sure I've ever met him. But yeah, it's crazy the legacy that he left.
yes, sir. Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, yeah, I mean, just from given roads, but you hear the stories too of him being like, "Hey, go to this cut early on," and the idea being that he didn't think gray bands were there, so he sent people there, and then they would come back and be like, "Oh, we found a gray band there," and he'd be like, "Oh, okay, that's another spot." So how
unintentionally he found more spots by sending people. And again, I didn't get the chance to speak to him, unfortunately, but what I would assume there was trying to do that. Hey, go look over there. I don't know, thinking there's not there, and then you gain more knowledge from that of where to be and where to go. So it's so interesting.
So there was an element. I mean, if you were his friend, you were his friend, and he would, hook you up with all the information. But if he didn't know you real well and he wanted to go hunt a particular area, he was not above steering you somewhere different.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, because he wanted those cuts for to himself.
Yes, sir. Completely understandable.
Yeah. So I don't hold that against him.
Yes, sir. And so those early trips out to West Texas, what was you said it took you 5 years to find your first gray band. Also, getting to see those gray bands that you did see, how much was locality a factor in gray bands at the time that you saw them in captivity?
So I think it was a big deal. At least it always has been for me. I mean, I caught my first lake trees. One was on the east side of the lake tree loop on the road. The female and the male was at 2.7 east, which is actually only about a mile from that snake. And they were both not attractive snakes, but that was like within a mile. I'm like, okay, that's locality. We were so excited, and that was like 1990.
Gotcha.
And so I think people were trying even then to get animals as close as possible. I mean, I've put out I don't know 50 or 100 East Sandersons from my original ones we caught between 5.2 and 5.7 east of Sanderson. And to me I think that's really super cool.
Yes, sir.
Um, I know there's people that don't give a hoot, but um, I think it was a big deal for the people that were serious about it even then.
Yes,
You
sir. Yeah.
know,
Yeah, so interesting. The only time I ever had heard anything different, because again, locality is the coolest factor to me too. To go, oh, I found two animals from a very similar spot or the same spot, and and to have that lineage, and for me, the work I put in, I think it's super cool. But the first time I ever heard anything different, was a much older herper going out there and telling me, "Hey, man, locality is just." It was a way to sell ugly snakes when it first started, and it took off. And I had never heard that before. And I went, what? He's like, yeah, we didn't care about locality. If we just found them, we were pumped to find them. And a locality, it was hard enough for us to find one. So it didn't matter.
right?
And I thought that was very interesting because I had never heard that before. To me, that was sacrilege. Like, what do you mean locality doesn't matter?
Yeah.
Disgusting. And so it was so funny because I'd never heard that. I would have never even thought that way.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, I know the folks that I ran with. I mean, it was a big deal, and if you're trying to sell babies, you're breeding, 5 mile west um, Langtree to a 3 mile east. People are like, that's 8 miles. I mean, as a practical matter, that gene pool flows the same way, and those animals are all very similar.
Yes.
Probably doesn't make a big difference, but 8 miles, it's like everybody looked at it. Yeah, you can't breed those together.
Yes. So, yeah, I think it is so funny, right? Because we understand, right, gene flow and how that works, and those animals are not going to be that separate from each other at all.
No.
And especially kind of understanding maybe how much more they move than when I first started thinking, oh, this animal, this hill, this cut, it never moves from there. And I don't think that's necessarily the case there. And
No,
so it's
definitely.
so funny to, but I agree 100%. I would never 8 miles. I would never do that. I would be disgusted with myself.
Yeah.
But it's so funny.
Yeah, it's crazy, they're so the Sanderson animals are a little different to me than Langtree. Of course, more alternomorphs pop up over there than what you see in Langtree. I've
Yes,
only
sir.
ever seen one alternomorph in Langtree, and then I think that the Juno and 277 clods they're very distinct and similar to one another, but they're very different on average than what you're going to find in Langtree or Sanderson. So I don't know.
Yes, sir. Yeah, no, you can definitely look at them and there be some distinction there and go, I usually have a pretty good guess going, I think this animal's from here.
Yeah.
And it pans out to be that way. So yes, sir, for sure. Well, so once that kind of cork popped for you, that I can relate with that feeling that after you found your first one, it just kind of all sets off. Uh, what are I don't know, I guess without giving out any locations you don't want to talk about, what are some of the cooler localities that you've found and projects or just anything, I guess just not projects you're working on but locations you found.
Yeah. So the pictures I sent you last week, believe it or not, I hunted Juneau the first time in the late '80s, and had never found an alterna there, and so the blares, the light blares that we found, that was at 8:40 in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
It was 96 degrees air temperature, and the road was 101. And when I
Wow.
saw the snake crawling across the road, I'm thinking, because I've had people do this, I'm thinking it's a rubber snake somebody's pulling with a line, but it looked real. And I'm like, there's no way that snake's moving at 96 degrees. So I'm thinking we're spinning our wheels. It's too hot. I've caught him up to 92 at dusk, but 96, I thought there's no way. So that was shocking. And then, of course, 11:40 same night, we find a dark alternomorph. So that was kind of neat to bust my cherry on Juno this last week. But I once I figured it out, we spent a ton of time hunting from Palma Draw to East Langtree in those areas and hitting those cuts. And I've got it written down somewhere, but I think I found close to 20 alterna over the next few years. In fact, I found 8 and 10 nights.
Very nice.
Well, that counts one at Seminole Canyon and one at the High Bridge, the Pecos High Bridge, and one in Comstock. But yeah, I found a ton of snakes on 90 once we figured it out. And then kind of 277 got out. Adam Sweetman was hunting it to himself for a year, and then it got out, and I went up there, and over the years, I think I found 14 or 15. I have to look at my list now on 277. So I hit that really, really hard for years. But every year I would go west, and I would hunt the river in Christmas because I've always wanted to catch Christmas mountain alternative. It still evaded me, and my wife and I hit it almost every year. We didn't have time this year, but for a night or two, and I still haven't been able to find my first Christmas mountain. But um, I did find a one on the river road, which if you count in the probably 120 nights I've or more that I've hunted the river road, it's one alterna, one milk snake, one blonde subbok, and one albino subbok.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
but I still love to hunt it because it's always something moving usually, and it's not unusual to see 20, 30 snakes a night, at least keep you awake, and there's always a chance you could find something really cool.
Yes, sir, for sure.
Um, and then so I in recent years I've been focusing a lot of time in the Chinati Mountains and Pinto Canyon, and Quitman Canyon. They're south of Sierra Blanca, in the Guads, and I hunted the Wacos. But our practice would be to hit the Wacos at least one night on our way out because we're driving from California. And so I finally did catch one of those about 20 years ago.
Very
Um,
nice.
Still haven't caught one in the Guads. Still haven't caught one in the Quitmans or the Chinatis, but it's coming. I'm gonna
Yes,
get
sir.
one.
Yeah,
So we
well,
always try to get new locales.
yes, sir. I can 100% agree with that. That it's always fun to find one, on Juneau or that kind of Comstock to Sanderson whole area. But for me, especially as time's gone on, finding those harder to find localities is so much more rewarding.
Yeah,
Uh, you know,
and
I
I agree. I have found one in the Davis, and I spent a lot of time in the Davis. I spent a lot of time on Black Gap. I went around the corner after John Seifer had just picked one up off the road. I've been close a few times, um, but I still haven't caught a gap. But we still hit all the. My thing is we'll look at the weather and where it's raining and where it has rained, and we move around based on that. So you know,
100%.
so I definitely have spent in recent years a lot more time in the western part of the range. And I was meeting Andy Carroll and Brett Nelson in Ozona. So that's why we hunted Juneau and Fort uh, Fort Lancaster and Ira Ann over the Labor Day weekend. But yeah, normally when we drive out and we're spending more nights, we're hitting farther west, at least a few nights, trying to find something new.
Yes, sir, for sure, for sure. One of the cool localities I found is a Glass Mountains animal, and
Nice. Did you get on 385, or were you able to get on the property with Travis or something?
no, sir, I got it on the cut on the road,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, that's yes, but it's a curse too, right? Because
Good luck pairing it
now
up.
now I got to go back, and of course it's a male, and
And the
the
females, they just don't crawl that far away from the mountain, man. They just, I mean, to get a female that far out, it's almost impossible.
yes,
Their
sir, yeah.
home is so much smaller. But if
Yes,
you
sir.
get with Travis Dimler, maybe he'll take you on the ranch and you can pair it up.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'll have to reach out. The unfortunate part is I don't get much more I don't get much herping time now with the business. So it's a lot of it's been very minimal trips. I quit to go snake hunting more, and now I snake hunt less. But working
So
towards it.
there was one morning, and I think this may have been one of the first glass mountains I ever caught, where I get this banging on my door at like 4:30 in the morning, and I'd just been asleep like 30 minutes. I just came in, and it's Craig Trumbauer at my door, and he's holding his palm out with this beautiful Blairsy looking thing with alternates, light kind of medium light phase, with decent orange. And he goes, "Look what I found! 385. It's a glass mountain. I think it was one of the first ones ever." He was so excited he had to wake me up to tell me about it.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's those things.
So,
Wake me up anytime.
yeah, yeah. For
I'm
that,
game
heck
for
yeah, heck
it.
yeah. It was like really cool. Those things are neat.
Yes,
But
sir.
I think Travis Dimler's found a few on on the ranch. He manages that ranch, so
Yes, sir. Yeah. No, I'm aware of that with him, and then there's another gentleman that has collected, I believe, one there and spent a lot of time in that area, and I've spoken to him too, and it's a male that he has, so that doesn't that doesn't help us.
no, I
And
do think there are several people breeding them though.
excellent, excellent. Well, I'll
Yeah.
have to follow up more on those leads for sure. Well, that's so cool. And so, what was as you mentioned a minute ago, you found an albino suboc, and what's so cool about that is you still see your name associated with that animal throughout, and to see it spread all over the world. I think that's one of the coolest things about reptile keeping and propagation in general, is that it's a it's a form of living art, where it's so cool, the idea of having some artists painting in your house and enjoying that, and taking appreciation in that maybe that person can't, you're right, they're not making art anymore, can't make art anymore. But what I think is so beautiful about the reptile hobby, if we look at it in an art way, is that there are people throughout the world that took joy and pleasure in the thing that you played a part in, and they propagated it and will keep it going. That's something that can fade away. A statue is going to stay there, but these people take the time to replenish this thing. And so that decision you made to herp at that point, and to find that animal, it now echoes on for as long as the hobby is there. What was that like, finding that snake?
So it was pretty amazing. So I don't know how well you know the River Road, but there used to be a
Yes, sir.
windmill. It's mostly fallen down now, but it's on the
Yes,
west
sir.
end, the River
Yep.
Road stretch there, um, and there's it's 2/10 of a mile east of the windmill is where I'm cruising along, and there's kind of this rock face on the right side. I'm headed westbound, and there's a kind of a big grassy shoulder on the left side. And I see this little snake crossing the road. It's moving pretty good, and I didn't know what it was. It was light colored, so I knew it wasn't an alterna. But so I actually pulled across the road and pulled onto the shoulder, but it was in the grass. Wasn't super thick grass, so I jump out and I run out there with my flashlight, and I hit it with my light, and I still remember thinking, "What the hell?" I for a second it didn't register, and I picked it up, And I walked up into the headlights and I looked at it. I'm like, holy shit, it's got pink eyes, you know? I'm like, this is a freaking albino. And I'm standing there dumbfounded. And guess who pulls up? Troy Hibbets, who's another guy I've been friends with for 40 years. And Troy, I go, look what I caught. Tell me this isn't real. Is this an albino? And so, you know, we got all excited. Troy doesn't get very excited, but anyway, you know, he thought it was really neat. And yeah, it was really kind of crazy. And you know, the interesting thing about this story is, you know, we went back to the hotel room, you know, after we hung until dawn and went out to, I was just full of adrenaline. We went back to it was at Wild Horse, and Troy was staying there as well in a different cabin with his wife Marla, and so he came over in the morning. We brought some rocks in, and he took some pictures of it, and it's kind of cool. I still have that picture. I had it blown up. You can see the Apinoma ticks, which is interesting to see them on the, you know, they're pretty much, um, you know, specialists on subox, those ticks.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
But anyway, so he took a picture. But I'm sitting in the hotel and I get this message to call Tracy Barker. And the interesting thing about this is I had been trying to get a hold of them. You know, I had all these questions about pythons, and they were very busy at the time, and you know, it was hard to get a call back. And now I'm sitting in a hotel room, and you know, I get this message to call her. So I called her, and she's like, "I heard you caught an albino something. Yeah, yeah. Can you bring it here? I want to see it." And you know, from the River Road to Bernie or wherever, I think she was in Bernie, you know, San Antonio area. It wasn't a short trip,
No.
but she's like, I really want to see it. Can you come by? And so you know, I always wanted to see their Python collection. You know, big love for, in particular for Womas, right? And blackheads and, you know, jungle carpet. I liked a lot of different Pythons. And, but the Womas were my dream snake. They're like the Australian rosy boa, but even prettier and a lot bigger. But anyway, so we drive over there, and it's they're filming a documentary for National Geographic, Nat Geo, on the pythons in the facility. And so she calls me. She says, "Look, when you drive in, you know, let us know when you're coming. I'm going to have them film you come in and have them film you." You know, telling me the story about the snake and showing me the snake. And so we did all that. They ended up not airing it. I'm not a very pretty man, I guess, but anyway, they didn't air it. And so, but you know, in the meantime, I'm having Dave Barker give me a tour of the facility, right? And so he's walking around, and you know, eventually we get to the Woma cages. He shows me the Womas, and then we go a little further, and he gets a phone call. And so, um, you know, and prior to this, he goes, "What'll it take? I'll write you a check right now for 10,000." And I'm like, "Holy shit!" You know, and I wasn't a rich guy back then. You know, I mean, it was like $10,000 was a lot of money, right?
Yes, sir.
And but I'm like, "No, I can't do this. This is the coolest thing I ever found. I'm not going to sell it. I'm just not going to sell it, right?" I go, "I'm sorry. No, I really want to try to raise it up and see if I can breed it and, you know, produce some." And and so anyway, he gets on the phone, he walks away, and I make my way back over to the Woma cages. I'm pulling out the drawer and looking at the Womas, and he comes back over and grabs me. I close the drawer, walk down a little further, shows me a few more rounds. He gets another phone call. I sneak back over to the Woma cages and I'm looking at him and I'm just admiring him. This happens 3 times. On the third time, I didn't hear him come up behind me. He goes, "If all it's going to take is a pair of Womas, you can have a pair of Womas." And in that moment, I knew he had me. I didn't want the 10 grand. I wanted the pair of Womas, right? But I'm not a completely dumb guy, so I'm like, well, I still want to be in on the ground floor on this project, right? So, and it's a hatchling snake. Who knows if it's going to survive to breed, right? Uh, you know, it's never a guarantee. And so I struck a deal with them that I would swap them that for a pair of their hatchling Womas, which they hadn't produced yet. I had to wait a couple months to get them, and I wanted 2.2 hets out of the first breeding, and it was a male, so that helped things because I think she bred it to 3 females the first year that she was able to breed it, and they agreed to it. And so, yeah, I ended up getting 2.2 hets out of that snake, and um, started breeding them. I passed them on to people like Gary Kiesler, who's been breeding them ever since. He's got quite a few of them. I've got a clutch sitting in my incubator 5 feet from here right now. And so it's fun. We've I bred the blonde that I caught on the River Road uh, to into the strain, and so we've made blondes, and now we've made albino blondes. In fact, I'm got a pair of albino blonde that'll breed next year. So that was kind of fun. And then so that's kind of what we've been doing with that. But I have to admit, I've shipped them to Europe, and um, like you say, they're around, and every once in a while I see a post that says Dave Longstrain, River Road albinos, and yeah, it does make me smile. I'm not gonna lie.
Yes, sir.
It's cool. It's a cool thing.
It's super cool. It's super cool. What do you think is, and I don't know if I just haven't seen it lately. Maybe I missed it because I saw some hets going on. Why don't you think we've seen a snow maid with your line of albinos?
So Gary has two,
Okay.
um, and so he just gave me two of his anneries, an annery blonde and annery normal, that are het albino and het blonde. Or the normal's het blonde. So yeah, so I think Gary's I think making them every year now, one or
Gotcha.
two,
Excellent.
one or
Okay.
two, and so and I could I think it's a 1 in 16 in the breeding that I just that I've got eggs cooking on, so I could produce a snow at any time. But I've produced quite a few of the albino blondes, which are cool.
Yes, sir.
Um, they're neat. And of course,
Very
they're
cool.
variable. Some of them, it's hard to tell as babies, but as you raise them up, some of them turn like really orange and purple, and some of them are just kind of more, subdued. They're not as pretty. You're like River Road subox. They're variable. You get bright orange ones, you get yellow ones, you get kind of tannish ones. There, and same thing when you captive breed them. So some of the albinos are a lot prettier than others, for sure.
Yes, sir. Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of variability on Subak on River Road and kind of what you see in that area, much more
Right.
than the Sanderson Comstock animals is generally going to be a very light colored animal with very symmetric pattern. And I feel like on River Road there's so much variability. One of my favorite localities, and to say locality and Subak, right? I get it. I understand the absurdness of it. But West Rancheria, I've seen a couple animals come out of there, and I have an animal from that area, and it is such a the couple animals that I've seen very unique, very blown out H's, more of kind of like a bubbly H, and a very nice mahogany color. And that animal's color change as it's matured has been very interesting to watch, where it pivots back and forth between a lighter colored animal and a very nice mahogany color. And there was another gentleman that had an animal from that area, and it had very similar changes throughout its life to where I wonder if these were clutch mates that they were so similar in pattern and color change over age.
Very cool.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's and I think we're getting more into locality subox out there. I mean, they're breeding those wild rose past Davises that are so beautiful, and I see Boy Scout locality subox, being offered out there, and I think they're getting more money for them, and so I think it's kind of cool. It's certainly not caught on like the obviously like the Alterna craze, but I think it's neat.
Yes, sir. Yeah. No, I have an Xanthic River Road male. That's a very nice animal. Very very cool. Well, excellent. And so, kind of early on, and are you? And you, I think earlier on you said you still keeping blackheads, or what
Oh
came
no,
of?
the
No,
one
no.
was no. No, I unfortunately, I live in a subdivision that has HOAs, and I can only have 120 square feet on my snake room. So I'm just doing. I don't have a tropical room anymore. I used to breed rainbow boas and womas, and I love breeding Brazilian rainbows. I think I had some of the nicest around in the '90s. They were just screaming. It was a lot of fun to walk out there and see 37 babies crawling around.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun. But yeah, I just don't. I'm not. Some at some point we're gonna. My wife's gonna let me retire. We're gonna come to Texas. I'm gonna build a tropical room and get Wilmas and blackheadeds and condor pythons again. I really miss those. Um, and so yeah, but for now it's just colubrids and rosy boas.
Excellent, excellent. I mean, that's yes. I feel very spoiled being in Texas and being so close to West Texas and South Texas and having that right, right there in my back door. It's
Are
a
you in the San Antonio area or?
yes, sir. I'm in San Antonio.
Oh, nice. I love that
Yes, sir.
area.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's nice.
we're looking at properties. I think the Bernie, Bulverde, that's all gotten kind of expensive. But like farther out by Kerrville, I know they just had a horrible flood, but that's kind of an area where I think my wife and I would be interested in going. Uh,
Yeah, there's a few areas, especially going even a little bit further out there, get you a little bit closer to Del Rio, and I think they're nice and they're a little bit untapped, but yeah, for sure, good spots.
yeah.
So with all of that and kind of where you started in the hobby and kind of your mentors throughout time, how has that kind of changed and what were the influences you felt from those people?
And so I think I still have a quite a you know some of the same mentors. Example Craig Trumbauer, and I had an amazing trip to Florida a few years ago, and was on the phone with him, and he was giving me advice and telling me where to go. I caught my first pine snake, which was cool. We found a couple eastern indigos. I mean, it was eastern diamondback. It was great panhandle trip. Still haven't found a goin eye. I've been looking for that Appalachia King for 30 years now, but I'll get one eventually. But so I still go to him. I still go to Gary. There's a lot of folks out there, that guys like Jerry Hartley. We're more like peers because we kind of grew up together under those guys. But they're still very close friends with a lot of folks. But yeah, I mean, I get stumped on something. I mean, I've been breeding critters for 40 years, but I still have questions. That I end up asking people. And I live around the corner from Tim Termasi, who was a pretty big breeder of colubrids and rosy boas, and had the best green tree pythons in the world, high yellow adults that were incredible. Lives around the corner, so I'm always bouncing off of him. Um, so there's a lot of mentors out there for sure, and another guy that I talk to frequently, who's a pretty good friend of mine, doesn't live too far away, is Robert Hansen. And we both share this love of gray bands together, and so I'm always calling him and bouncing off locality ideas. Well, what do you think about this mountain range? It hasn't really been explored, but shouldn't they be there? And those kinds of things. Those are some of my favorite discussions to have.
Yes, sir, for sure. Yeah, I mean, especially right, that echoes those long nights out in West Texas and the conversations that you have, how fulfilling those can be, and the crave to have those conversations when you can't, and you're right. You'll ask the same question 5,000 times, and at the end, still not have an answer for it.
Yeah. Well, and it's an interesting, I'm really lucky because my wife goes, for the last 24 years, she goes with me. And in fact, she's caught more gray bands in the last 15 years than I have. Or, she's found quite a few. Um, and, she's only a snake person because of me, but she really enjoys going out. But I think part of it is just that quality time we get together. No kids, no dogs, no, it's just us and all night and chatting and stuff, and I think it's really healthy for the marriage. I mean, I look forward to it all year. So
Yes, sir. Yeah. No, it's very interesting. My wife was also very much so into it and loves doing it and getting to do that with your partner and share that. I think it's so interesting. You get to talk to different people and you hear their experiences with their parents growing up and either being interested or being supportive or not being supportive, and it's all hardcore keepers and field herpers that I'm speaking to, and so they ended up in the same spot, but their upbringing was so different. And then it's a whole nother level that when your partner's into it, to get to share that passion and then be equally excited. And to your point about your wife finding more, it's that bird watcher effect, right? Where the fact that they're not as interested, they're going to find the thing that we're dreaming about with not much enthusiasm, or not that there's not enthusiasm, but to what we would feel internally.
Yeah, my first trip taking her out to really first Alterna hunt ever. We left Sanderson just right at dusk, and within the first 15 minutes, she found two Alterna. Bam, bam. She's like, I don't know, this is so easy. What And it was a pair. It was a male and a female. I'm just like,
uh,
yeah. And so I thought, well, that's never going to happen again. A couple years later, she did it again, 2 and 15 minutes in that same 5 mile stretch. She hasn't done it a third time. I'm pushing her. It's time that she does it again because that was like 20 years ago. But yeah, no, it was pretty amazing experiences.
See, the problem is now she's into it. I think that's my wife's problem. I wish my wife was less interested in field herping because maybe we would pull more up when she was herping with
Yeah, it
me.
seems like you definitely find more when you don't care or you don't think. I wasn't seriously looking at 96 degrees last week when that I'll across the road. I was just like, I'm just killing time till it cools off.
Well, and that's
And
the thing. That's the thing about Alterna is you might not see another snake all night, but you might see an Alterna, and it doesn't matter what the conditions are. Are there definitely conditions where I would rather be in this setting? 100%, yes, sir, I would. But there's almost always a chance, and it's such a weird animal, and I think that's part of maybe what we love so much about it.
Eric Tamias and I heard this from Hollister too. They would say that Alterna are the commonest snake in Val Verde County.
Hmm.
And I mean, the two we found the other night, only snakes we saw. Didn't see an Atrox, didn't see not a single other snake. And I can't tell you how many nights I found multiples, and that was the only thing we saw was an
Yep.
Alterna. So you're 100% right. I mean, they move. And sometimes, like when I start seeing just tons of snakes moving, I'm like, we could find an Alterna, but it's sometimes it's better if you're not seeing anything, especially when the conditions are right. And
Yes, sir.
I've got this theory: when you see the scolopendra, the big giant centipedes crawling, the barometric pressure is perfect for Alterna. They're symbiotic. So if you see those, start hunting fast and moving because the Alterna are moving. And
Interesting. Interesting.
I mean, my
But
my research is anecdotal, but it's proved out many, many, many times.
and that's the thing in this weird matrix of an existence that we're in, where I will say that I can't ever. My memory's terrible, but and I have my cues where I go, "This is oh buddy, this is the night," and centipedes aren't one of them for me, and
Yeah.
so but there's not validity in what you're saying for sure. So, but it's just so interesting, right? Where maybe at the end of the day we don't know jack shit. We just
Yeah.
right. We're just justifying to the best of our ability, justifying
Yeah,
this
that's
us.
what Hollister would say: southeast wind gusts 15 to 25 miles an hour. If the wind's coming from the north, go home. You're never going to see anything. I found them with wind from the north. I found them when it's still, but very rarely. But usually, if there's a nice gusty wind and you got thunderstorms around, you got a good shot. But it used to crack me up because we'd sit there in the hotel room at the Desert Hills there, and back in the day, and we're watching the Weather Channel the whole day. We're just scanning. And I remember Eric Tamias coming in one day, and he goes, "What the hell are you guys doing? You know you're going to go out anyway." So why do you care what the weather says? You're gonna go anyway, you know. But we just could. I mean, we just binge watching the Weather Channel all day long. You
Well,
know.
that's that early on. So you talk to people, especially when they start earlier on, and we didn't have the temperature on our dash, we didn't have this. You got a radar on your phone, and you have it so much better than we did, and so that kind of old school mentality of, hey, just keep throwing mud at the wall and sooner or later it's going to stick, but again too, right, he had his parameters saying if this is it, I find him, and he found him,
Yeah.
right? So again, it's all anecdotal, but his parameters work for him, your parameters work for you, mine work for me, and we're all finding gray bands, and it gets back to that idea that it's the most common species in the area. Is it just every night there's a gray band out? Now I don't believe this. This is just a hypothetical, stance here. But is it that every night there's a gray band moving, and we're not in that spot at that time, but it happens every single night, no matter what the conditions are? It, maybe after talking to enough people, that's what it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was a half moon last weekend. And I typically won't go during a half moon, but I know people that found them on a full moon. You know, everybody says, "Oh, you can't. They don't crawl." No, you know, Eric Tamias. I don't know if you know Eric, but he's very
Yes,
common
I've met
sense.
him.
Also, he's brilliant, smart guy. I mean, highly educated. You know, if you get to talking to him, he knows, especially about insects and. Uh, but he's just a really, really smart guy, and I forgot what I was going to tell you. What were we talking about right before that?
Just talking about kind of what you think is a good night and what I think is a good night
Oh,
condition wise and how that might spread or change.
yeah. So he would always say, those things got to eat. They got to, and if it's springtime, they got to breed. They're moving. Get out there. Don't worry about it. They got to eat. And so, he would always encourage us to go, even when the conditions were horrific. But we were going anyway. We drove all the way to Texas to do it. But
But yeah,
uh,
I think especially with alternative hunting, the mindset you have to have is you have a better chance of catching them on the road than you do in the hotel. And so
exactly.
even if the conditions are trash, go. You know, I've made that mistake before where hey, conditions aren't what I want them to be and I'm calling it. And that's now as I've learned more, those were the most peak conditions I could have ever been in and I'm a dumbass.
I think we've all learned that lesson over the years for sure.
Yes, sir, for sure. Well, that's so cool. What were some of your out of so right? You're in you're not just herping West Texas. You're kind of spreading out and going for as many locality or as many species as possible. What is your what is your American list like? How many species do you have currently?
So I'd have to write them down. But I've caught, almost everything that I've tried to find in the U.S. I've found. There's some exceptions. No short-tailed snakes from Florida. Um, and then there's of course subspecies of things. Mud snakes really high on my list. I've still never found a mud snake, and I've looked. I found a DOR in Kentucky. Um, but there's a few. Rainbow snake, of course, is almost impossible, but that would be really cool. Something that I wanted to see since I was a kid. I knocked the eastern indigo and the pine off the list, a couple of years ago. So that was really amazing for me. But I found all three coral snakes. I found almost every rattlesnake. I think I'm missing the midget faded. Um, and the eastern Massasauga, I think, are the only two I've not found in the U.S. So I've knocked off a lot of species I always wanted to see. But yeah, there's still things on the list. I've caught a lot of milk snakes. I still want to find one in Utah. So we went up there a couple months ago and tried that again. I guess because it's fairly close, it's not too far from me. But yeah, um, so many great places to herp. I mean, my first couple times going to Kansas was just like the most amazing thing on the planet when you can find 500 snakes in a day. I mean, my first trip, Brett and I found 62 milks in 3 days. And see all that tricolor eye candy under rocks in that short amount of time was just like amazing. So I don't know. I've really enjoyed it, getting out there and just seeing the things because from starting at about 10 years old, I was looking at field guides and dreaming about finding different species and seeing them in the wild and things like fox snakes and eastern milks and things like that. That I was able to knock all those off the list, which is really kind of cool.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no,
Yeah.
and go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to mention. So I turned 60 in May, and those two alternate were my 60th and my 61st. So, and I could have been a lot higher if I had spent, if I hadn't been spending so much time in the western areas and the new areas in recent years. But I'm kind of happy. That's a pretty good amount. You know,
Yes, sir. Of
um,
course.
I am counting the ones my wife found with me
Hundred
though.
percent, 100%. I listen. You got to count what your partners find, right?
Yeah, we were
The
together.
yeah,
So
that counts. That's your herping partner. You were there, right?
yeah,
right. I froze. I was there. 100%.
yeah.
Give me my split. And that's yeah. No, that's and those are wonderful numbers. I mean, if you think about the span of time, right? It took you 5 years. It took me 10 years. I've not been herping as long, but spend a lot of time out west, and I'm up to 7, and I'm super proud of those 7. So 60, but I bet that feeling of finding it doesn't go away, and it's not better, not any better than the first time. That ecstatment of finding those animals, and it never gets old.
And I mean, I don't know how many. I've probably spent 100 nights on Juno since the '80s, late '80s, and every time I went through those S curves, I could envision that light blares crawling across the road right there. I mean, I've seen it in my mind's eye a million times, and when it actually happened, it was like, took 40 years to or 30 years to, for it to come to pass, but it was like such a great feeling. I was so excited. It was just freaking cool. So
Yeah.
I know there's been a million Junos caught over the years, but that was my first. So, and then of course it's easy once you catch your first one. Same way with 277. Once I caught my first one, then I was able to find much more, but it took a while to get that first one.
Yeah, it gets back to the whole idea of it, like this weird, like, are we in some Matrix-esque world where it's like, what are the chances once you find it? It's like an unlock in a video game or some craziness where it's like, once I did it, I can do it again, but it just took me so long to finally do it, and now here it is again. My first Alterna I ever found, I end up finding 2 that trip, and it is a 7-day trip, and it took me
Yeah.
10 years to find 1, and then I found 2, and it's like, well, what was that? Now I think a lot of knowledge was gained. I will say that from the first time to when that finally culminated and what that meant, and it completely changed the way that I herped, where it solidified what I do. But you know, it's interesting how that happens.
Yeah. It's a cheat code once you catch the first one.
Yes, yeah, and it almost seems like it's like I said, I have a formula in my head of what I do, but it almost seems so much more like it's not. I'm not thinking about it. It's just happening. I think, right. We've all been out, and you spot this snake, and well, I wasn't even looking where it was. I just knew there was a snake right there. So stop and let's look at this area.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. It's just kind of, yeah. You get so locked in on it, right?
Yeah, and then you also learn the little idiosyncrasies about, you know, um, the snakes are very often at the ends of the cuts and the bottom and the top. Sometimes they're right smack dab in the middle, but there's a lot more often they're at the ends and at the bottom and the top. You know, and so you start to key in those areas because you're not going to miss the ones in the middle of the doggone white cut.
Yes, sir.
I think that little things like that really improved my odds. And then of course just understanding that the snake looks black. I mean, we used to spotlight across two 4 lanes from the car, and I found at the Pecos High Bridge, I found I just saw a black spot on this cut that was about the size of a quarter, and from across 3 lanes of traffic, um, I'm like, that's a gray van. It was just like this round, and I drove over there, and sure as shit, it was the head of a gray van sticking out of the doggone hole. And but my buddy ran over there with 2 fingers, reached in the hole and pulled that snake out. I'm still amazed he was able to
Wow.
do that. But
Yeah, right.
but
Thing didn't bow up.
you know that color, and when you see that particular sheen and the way they absorb light, and it's like even just seeing a part of them now, you're like, oh yeah, I know what that is.
Yeah,
But it takes a while. It definitely
yeah.
takes a while.
Hey, and for all the people that haven't seen that yet, it sucks to suck. No, and then you gotta.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's it's an earned thing, and it's so cool. I think that's such a cool part about it, right?
For
And
sure.
what
For
and
sure.
so what kind of and also, right, you're traveling outside of the United States. What's that like, and where were your first trips, and
So I've done a lot, quite a lot in Mexico, especially in the '90s. We did a lot of Baja trips, and so that's amazing to find Baja rat snakes and rosy boas down in Baja, and seeing all the Inyo rattlesnakes. There's a lot of really neat snakes down there, and some pretty good seafood and decent other food. So it had some great memories there. But I'd say my 2 favorite herping experiences, certainly Suriname last year was tops. I found a ton of um, the slender tree boas, and We found an emerald tree boa that was about a 6 footer, beautiful one. I got some great pictures with that. And we did find a small, about 6 foot anaconda. Did not find a boa constrictor. I still struck out on boa constrictors and all over Mexico, Costa Rica, Belize, and now South America. I've still not found my first boa constrictor, so that's high on my to do list. From anywhere, I just want to find a boa constrictor in the wild, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Um, but Suriname was just absolutely incredible. We found the bilineatus tree vipers, and we found lots of fertilances, of course, but a lot of cool little weird fossorial snakes. And Don found one of the aquatic corals, which are just incredible. And they lunged for it with the tongs and just missed it. So the rest of us didn't get to see it, but those things are incredible. We saw just all kinds of cool stuff, caught caimans and the frogs. The frogs in Costa Rica are just off the hook. Just unbelievable place. The red-eyed tree frogs, and my favorite picture that I have of me is we're walking around Arenal, and this red-eyed tree frog literally jumped on the side of my head. My wife took a picture of it. It was a big one too, and I'm just grinning from ear to ear with that dang frog sitting on the side of my head. I just great memories in Costa Rica too. I want to go back really badly. So.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Little reptile Snow White. I like to hear it, and that's the cool part about herping, right? Is getting those experiences and seeing those things happen, and what are the chances, right? For to
Yeah,
make the decision to be there at that time, and then for that animal for whatever reason to be jumping, and it all culminates into that moment, and get to especially sharing that with your wife and her enjoyment of it too. That's so cool.
yeah, it was neat. It was very cool.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, excellent, excellent. And so, kind of moving forward, what are some of what are the things you're looking forward to? What anything in your collection that you're working towards, and where's the future taking you?
Yeah, so I'm like I said, I'm super excited about those mandarin rat snakes. They're from Matt Most at Sarpamitra. They're the Vietnamese ones, so they're just screaming yellow, and I mean they're just beautiful snakes. And it's just a species I've never worked with before, so I'm super excited to hopefully get those to hatch out. And I'm working uh, on a lot of different. So I had a wild caught 277 from Jimmy Dobus that he sent out to me. And last year she threw slugs. This year I literally got 14 eggs out of her, and 9 of them hatched. And it's the prettiest clutch of Blair's morphs I've ever made. They're incredible. Bred to one of my male 277s, and so I just hopefully getting all those guys up and going and splitting them with Jimmy and getting them to New Jersey. I'm excited about that. I've got F1 River Roads that I hatched out, 4 babies that I'm splitting with Tim Burkhart. The river male is his, and so trying to get those guys going this year. But yeah, I just I still haven't successfully reproduced my Davis snake. I caught my wife and I caught a male and got a female from the same cut from Brian Box. And yeah, I don't know what the deal is, but sooner or later I like to breed those and get that line established because they're from the same cut and the male and female look almost identical.
My
Um,
Davis Mountain were the most difficult pairing for me to get to breed. It took me 8 years of failures, and then I switched a few things up, and I had the most robust babies I'd ever had. But we can speak about that after if you're at all interested.
no, I'm very interested. I have some, I think having the varied diet is really critically important, and I do have a little cheat code that has worked well with all the other localities. So we can chat about that after for
Yes,
sure.
sir. Well, excellent. Well, again, you know what? I think being respectful of your time and us going to chat here, we'll call it here for tonight. And I could talk to you for I think hours on end about herping and keeping animals. And thank you so much for your time tonight
Oh, it's my
and
pleasure.
taking the time to chat with me. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do it anytime. And if you can get Craig Trumbauer on or Gary Kiesler or Jerry Hartley, those guys you'd get some really interesting stories with them as well. So
Well, excellent. Yes, sir. Just send me a list of everybody you want me to message, and I will gladly message them. I want to get as much of this as I can down, and everybody and anybody is welcome to come on and talk. It's just about documenting it.
Yeah, and I think for guys like Craig and Gary that are getting older, I mean, Craig. I don't know if you know Craig, but one of the best human beings on the planet. But he is a character. He is so much fun to talk to, and he just his stories, never ending, amazing stories, and I think you would get a huge kick out. Your listeners would get a huge kick out of listening to Craig's
Excellent.
stories. So
I'll message
I,
him. Well, again, thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Let me zoom out on you here. Okay, you got a message for the time capsule?
Yeah, and it's simply this. My prediction for you is that even though you'll forget all about this in some way consciously, next summer at about this time, you'll remember to return.